All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to our webinar for new board members. Welcome to the board. I'm Sam Laurie, the ACNC's Guidance and Education Manager, and with me today is Lucas Ryan, who's a Senior Education Officer with the ACNC. Both of us are also on boards of not-for-profits. Welcome, Lucas.
G'day, Sam.
And also with us today is Lee Law. Lee is one of the ACNC's lawyer and will be here to answer any of the more technical questions that may be asked during the webinar. Welcome, Lee.
Hi, Sam.
Also joining us is April from our advice team, who will be answering any questions you may have along the way through the question box. I'll just let you know at this point that we have quite a few people registered for today's webinar, so we may not get to every single question during the webinar, but we do keep a record and we will be answering them after the webinar, and we will send out a reporting email. Hi, April.
Hello.
Throughout the webinar, you can ask a question at any time in the GoToWebinar panel on your screen. April will be able to answer your questions directly, but if she thinks the answers would be useful for everyone, she can also respond in a way that will allow everyone to see the question and also the answer, but not who asked it. Please let us know if you'd like your question and also the answer. Your question to remain private. If there are any questions we can't answer today, we'll provide answers later, as I said. We'll also allow some time for some questions at the end, after the formal presentation's finished, when we'll stay online to chat. The purpose of this webinar is to introduce you to being a board member of a charity registered with the ACNC. We'll give you the regulator's perspective on what it means to be a board member, what your duties are, and some key things you'll need to know and do. A recording of this webinar and the transcript and slides will be available on our website within a few days of the webinar. If you have any difficulties with the sound on your computer, try calling the phone number listed in the GoToWebinar control panel. Finally, we value any suggestions you have to improve our webinars in the future. So please pass on your suggestions in the survey that will pop up at the end of this session. First of all, for new board members, congratulations on your appointment. Now, a bit of an overview of what we're covering today. As a starting point, I'll say that we're talking about board members for convenience, but what we're covering applies to anyone with a governance role in a charity who fits the definition of what the ACNC refers to as a responsible person, called a responsible entity in the ACNC Act. These people include board and committee of management members as well as trustees. Today's session aims to introduce you to being a board member for a registered charity. It won't cover everything that you need to know about good governance. There are plenty of resources available that do that, including our own Governance for Good guide, but it will cover some of the key issues you'll need to be aware of so that you can feel confident to undertake your role in a responsible way. First, we'll give you an overview of what the ACNC does and how it relates to your charity. Then we'll also outline the responsibility that you have to your charity as a board member. After that, we'll get into more detail about some of the key issues, such as your role in ensuring that your charity operates as a not-for-profit and works towards its purpose, is accountable to its members, manages its finances responsibly, and manages any conflicts of interest that board members may have. We'll also point to where you can get more information along the way.
First, we'll take a look at the ACNC and its role in relation to your charity. The ACNC is the independent national regulator of charities. We are a specialist charity regulator, and there are essentially 5 functions we perform. We register charities. Registration with the ACNC is voluntary, but you must be registered to receive charity tax and concessions and the other benefits of charity status. We maintain an online database of registered charities, the Charity Register. This is freely available, searchable, and used by the public, donors, volunteers, grant makers, and government. There is an increasing awareness of the Charity Register, and it is now being frequently used as a checking tool when, for example, government agencies are reviewing charities before awarding grants. We also provide guidance and education to charities on their obligations to the ACNC. Advice is available via our phone line, email and mail services, and we provide guidance and education in print, online, and face-to-face formats. We monitor the compliance of charities with the requirements of being registered, such as meeting the governance standards and lodging an annual information statement. We also respond to concerns raised about charities by the public and by other government agencies. And finally, we have a responsibility in all of our work to try and reduce red tape for charities by ensuring that our processes are as streamlined as possible and by working with other agencies to try and harmonise reporting requirements. So that's what the ACNC does, but let's look quickly at the obligations of registered charities. All charities are required to meet certain obligations to the ACNC. A registered charity must continue to meet these obligations if it wants to stay registered. Firstly, you have to maintain your entitlement to be registered as a charity. This means being a not-for-profit and pursuing your charitable purpose, but we'll talk about these things later in the webinar. You need to keep records, which is also good practice and can help your charity to do its work efficiently. You must keep both operational and financial records, and you do not have to provide these records to the ACNC unless we ask you for them specifically. Your charity must submit a report about your operations and finances to the ACNC every year. This is called the Annual Information Statement, or the AIS. You can submit your AIS online through the ACNC Charity Portal. You can also use the Charity Portal to notify us when certain things change at your charity. You must notify us if there are changes to your charity's name, its governing documents, like its rules, its responsible persons, that is, the board members, people like you, and its address for service. And finally, and probably of most interest to you as a board member, your charity must meet the ACNC governance standards, which we will cover in more detail shortly.
Thanks, Lucas. Just one more question about these requirements. Some people might be wondering, what should they do if they become aware of their charity failing to meet any of its obligations to us? Or, for example, if there's an error in information that the charity has provided to the ACNC?
Well, it is a duty to notify us if these things occur. Of course, the sooner people let us know about these issues, the better, and if they aren't sure, our advice services team is always happy to answer any queries. Aren't you, April?
Absolutely.
As I said before, registered charities need to meet a set of governance standards which set out minimum requirements for the governance of charities. They help charities to remain trusted by the public and continue to do their charitable work in a way that meets their obligations under the law. They are not a description, however, of best practice in governance, but rather a set of minimum standards. The standards are outcomes-based, meaning that they do not exactly describe how a charity must comply with each standard, but instead set a minimum outcome that must be achieved. We've got plenty more information about each standard and examples on how they can be met on our website.
Thanks, Lucas. Are there any charities that may have additional requirements?
Well, if your charity has any additional requirements, such as in its constitution or under any legislation that may apply to it, the governance standards are in addition to these requirements. For example, incorporated associations may be required under their state or territory laws to hold annual general meetings. The governance standards don't require this specifically, but holding an AGM can be a good way to meet governance standard too.
I know from my own experience that being a member of a board is a privilege, and it can be a great opportunity to learn new skills and actively participate in the life of a not-for-profit. It can be a big commitment though. Do you think that when people join boards, they know what they're signing up for?
Being on a board is very rewarding, and you can learn a lot, as well as giving something back by donating your time, skills and experience. But joining a board also means accepting a significant responsibility to the charity, its members, beneficiaries and to the broader community. This is why it's important to understand what your responsibilities are, as well as those of your charity. The work of a board is instrumental to the success or otherwise of a charity. Being a board member is more than simply being a volunteer. You have a specific legal role in the organisation and certain responsibilities to the charity. Board members should make sure that they are aware of the extent of these responsibilities before they agree to accept their role.
So, collectively, the members of a charity's board share ultimate responsibility for the way a charity is run. As a group, board members exercise power within a charity that effectively applied can make a significant contribution to the success of the charity. As a board member, you have a special relationship with your charity. Your charity places trust in the members of its board to act on its behalf, and to do so with the best interests of the charity in mind. As a result, you owe duties to your charity. We'll talk about these in more detail, but they are, broadly, to act carefully and diligently, and always in the best interest of your charity and for a proper purpose. The charity has duties not only to its beneficiaries, but also to the ACNC and other agencies, such as fundraising and incorporating regulators. As part of this exchange, the public has trust and confidence in charity. So Lucas, how does this trust relationship create duties, and what are those duties?
The charity places trust in you to serve its best interests as a board member and collectively as a board. When you become a board member, you accept the responsibilities that come with this trust. These are your duties. They reflect the expectations that the community has of people in the position of board members, and they are enshrined in the law. Some duties may vary depending on the legal structure of your charity, but all duties are owed to the charity. It is for this reason that board members and other responsible persons have a greater responsibility to the charity than other volunteers. Accepting the trust of your charity to act as one of its board members means giving what is required of you to fulfill the role in full and to meet the duties that you owe. Let's take a look at some of the particular duties of board members of registered charities. Sam?
Thanks, Lucas. A few moments ago, Lucas referred to the ACNC governance standards which apply to registered charities. Governance Standard 5 sets out that charities must take reasonable steps to ensure that 7 specific duties apply to their responsible persons and that their responsible persons follow them. These duties come from the common law and have well-established meanings. The first duty requires that board members exercise a degree of care and diligence in their roles, such as reading any papers, turning up for meetings on time, and making sure that they are appropriately informed about any matter on which they need to make a decision. Duty number 2 requires that you always act honestly and fairly, but importantly, in the best interests of your charity. When you become a board member for a charity, you accept a duty to act in its best interests, and you must ensure that you're always doing so when acting as a board member, and that you do so in a way that's consistent with your charity's charitable purpose. The third duty requires that you not misuse your position. For example, you must not use your position to intimidate staff or act on behalf of the charity at public events when you're not authorised to do so. The fourth duty requires that you not use any information you gain in your position as a board member in a way that's improper. For example, if you gain access to confidential information in the course of your work as a board member, this must only be used for the purposes of informing any decisions you make on that board. Under the fifth duty, a responsible person who has or may appear to have a material conflict of interest in a decision being made by the board members should tell the other responsible persons about it. Once the other board members are told about the interest, the charity may also need to take steps to ensure that this conflict is managed appropriately. The sixth duty you have is to ensure that your charity's financial affairs are managed responsibly. This means that understanding your charity's financial position and making decisions which will not endanger its financial health. This duty is not intended to discourage you from being innovative or taking risks, but rather to encourage charities to maintain appropriate financial systems and procedures to ensure its ongoing financial sustainability. Finally, the seventh duty. You must ensure that your charity does not operate while it's insolvent. This means that your charity must be able to pay its debts as and when they fall due. Later in this webinar, we'll look at the key issues that board members face and how these can be related back to the governance standards. Now we'll look at what the board does as a group and what individual board members do to contribute to the work of the board.
The work of boards is diverse and varies significantly between charities. The way a board approaches its work may change, but there are some essential components common to the work of all boards. These include things such as setting the longer-term or big picture goals and making sure the work of the charity is aligned with the purposes for which it exists, as well as short-term or milestone goals that help to keep track of your progress towards achieving your goals. This usually involves work such as overseeing the development of a strategic plan and ensuring the alignment of any corporate or business plans to the goals of the organisation. Boards also facilitate accountability within a charity, ensuring that the work of the charity is explained to the members and that they have a reasonable opportunity to ask questions or raise concerns about the way a charity is run. Board members are responsible for ensuring that they themselves are accountable, but also that there are structures and processes in place so that there is accountability throughout the charity. Ensuring that the charity is compliant with any obligations it may have under the law is a big part of the work of boards. As the custodians of a charity, board members need to be confident that their charity is meeting its legal obligations. Perhaps one of the most important responsibilities of board members relates to gaining and maintaining funding and other resources, such as volunteer time. The board must work to gather resources necessary for a charity to undertake its work, but also ensure that they're protected from abuse and used in an efficient and lawful way. Boards also monitor progress towards goals, in particular, making sure that the work of their charity is aligned to its purpose. And finally, they manage risk. The board identifies major strategic risks and ensures that there are systems in place for the charity to identify, manage and respond to risks throughout the charity. For example, having financial controls in place to manage any risk of fraud.
Thanks, Lucas. So, can I ask, how can an individual board member contribute to the work of the board?
There's a great deal an individual member can and must do as a board member. As part of exercising their role and duties, board members need to, among other things, prepare for and attend board meetings. This means reading any papers in full, as well as undertaking any independent research you need to do in order to be properly informed about matters being discussed, keeping informed about the charity, including about its financial and operating position, risks and issues it faces, as well as any opportunities it may have, listening to and participating in discussion at board meetings. Board members are generally expected to be active participants in the decision-making processes, and engaging in these discussions is part of doing due diligence as a board member. As part of this process, board members also make decisions on behalf of the charity as a group, and this may mean at times that you will be required to vote to make certain decisions. Finally, board members generally are part of subcommittees, which are committees of the board with a specific responsibility, or otherwise may be involved in some project work outside of board meetings.
Thanks, Lucas. So these are actions board members of all types can take. Is there anything in particular that board members of registered charities need to be aware of?
Well, we've come up with a few points that we think board members should be aware of based on our work in compliance, feedback we received from charities, and our collective experience and expertise as specialists in the not-for-profit sector. Under Governance Standard 1, all charities must be able to demonstrate to the public that they have a charitable purpose, and they must work towards this purpose. As a board member, you should be familiar with your purpose in order to make sure that your charity is working towards it. So what is the charitable purpose? Essentially, it's the reason your organisation was set up, or what activities you work towards. It is at the heart of what you do. All charities registered with the ACNC must have a charitable purpose, which meets the definition set out in the Charities Act. The first step you should take is to find out exactly what your charity's purpose is. Charities will usually record their charitable purpose as their object or purpose within their governing documents. These are the charity's constitution, rules, or articles of association, or any other document that sets out how it is established and operates. If your charity has them, it's important as a board member to understand your governing documents. Knowing exactly what your charity is trying to achieve is essential to succeeding as a board member. You cannot begin to work on how to get to your destination before you know what your destination is. As a board member, it's your job to ensure that your charity stays on course, and yes, part of your job is to ask, are we there yet? So in summary, you should make sure you understand what your charity's purpose is and familiarise yourself with any documents that explain it. When you're making decisions as a board member, consider whether your decisions are in alignment with your charitable purpose and, at regular intervals, review how you are working towards it. When making a decision, you should ask yourself how it will contribute to achieving your charity's charitable purpose. Governance Standard 1 requires your charity to be able to demonstrate that it is a not-for-profit. A not-for-profit is an organisation that does not operate for the profit, personal gain, or other benefit of particular people, such as your charity's members, the people who run it, or their friends or relatives. This does not mean that your charity cannot make a profit. It simply means that any profit made must go towards pursuing its charitable purpose. There are some simple steps that you can take to be confident that your charity remains as a not-for-profit. One of the easiest ways is to make sure that your charity's governing documents contain clauses which require it to operate as a not-for-profit. If your governing documents already include clauses such as these, make sure you've read them and that you understand them, and you know how to find them if the need arises. As a board member of a not-for-profit, your responsibility is to ensure that there are systems in place that enable your charity to operate as a not-for-profit, both in word and in deed. Another way to do this is through establishing a policy to prevent the misuse of funds or assets for private benefit. A policy on a topic such as this might include information about how assets will be used, to whom suspected misuses should be reported, and what steps you will take if there is a breach. Of course, central to all of this is ensuring that the people involved with your charity know that it is a not-for-profit. New board members, staff or volunteers should clearly understand what being a not-for-profit means and what their responsibilities are to the charity as a result. Finally, it's a good idea to establish strong financial controls, which will enable you to determine whether your charity's assets are being used for their not-for-profit purpose. You can find out more about what it means to be a not-for-profit at acnc.gov.au/not-for-profit. As a board member, you should be asking yourself, are my charity's assets and money being used solely for its charitable work, and are there systems in place which prevent them from being misused?
Governance Standard 2 requires that your charity is accountable to its members. You can help support this by ensuring your charity communicates with its members about the decisions it makes and provides them with an opportunity to be heard. There are a number of ways your charity can be accountable to its members. For example, develop a policy which outlines how your charity will respond to members. For example, if a member wants to ask a question of the board, is there a certain time frame within which the board has to respond, or a process that needs to be followed in the event of a dispute? Everyone in your charity should be clear about the processes that make your charity accountable. And finally, communicate regularly. Provide reports to your members, stakeholders, supporters and clients. Charities do this in a number of ways, such as through providing regular newsletters, email bulletins for important updates, and usually an annual report. You could hold meetings with your members. Most charities will hold an annual general meeting. And it's a good idea to ensure that you provide members with the opportunity to ask questions and to receive honest and fair answers. How you do this may be up to you, but you should make sure that your members have reasonable opportunity to ask questions and to raise concerns about the way your charity is run. You should ask yourself, how can my charity's members find out about the charity's work and ask questions about the way we do our work?
As a board member, you have a general responsibility to act with reasonable care and diligence. Governance Standard 5 requires the charity to ensure that board members know and undertake their duties in this way. Please bear with us while we try and resolve a small technical issue. As a board member, you should aim to be careful and diligent in your work. Remember that you are the custodian of your charity on behalf of its members, beneficiaries, and the community, and the expectations of your care in this role are higher as a result. However, there are some simple things to consider which may help you to meet these expectations. You should participate actively in the discussion of any meeting you attend. You should make your views known and seek to understand the views of others and the reasons that they have arrived at these views. It may sometimes be necessary for you to undertake independent research as part of your role. You need to make sure that you have the relevant facts for any decision you may make, but sometimes it can be useful to understand the broader context of the decision or to review what others have done in similar circumstances. You should not rely exclusively on the information provided to you as a board member by the charity's staff or volunteers. As part of this process, you should make sure that you are asking questions about anything you don't understand. It's your duty to understand any information relevant to a decision you have to make, and if you're not comfortable about a decision, you should feel confident to ask for more time or further information. You should also reflect on whether you are making any assumptions as part of your decision-making processes. Identifying and testing your assumptions will help you to make more reliable and informed decisions as a board member. Identifying risks and deciding how they are managed is a core part of the responsibilities of the board. Considering what risks are associated with any decision you may make is part of doing your due diligence. You should ask yourself, would somebody observing my conduct as a board member feel that I was being careful and diligent in my work? Of course, you can seek and, up to a point, rely on the advice of an expert, but you must not do so blindly. You should carefully consider any advice you are given and ask questions to ensure that you understand it, especially if you identify any inconsistencies in the advice. Professional advisors play an important role within charities, but your duties require that you exercise a questioning mind when you receive advice. You should be exercising diligence when selecting who you take your advice from, how you interpret their advice, and what you do with it. Remember that even if someone is an expert, their advice may not be right for you in your particular circumstances.
Our next key point relates to the primary duty of all board members, which is to always act in the best interests of their charity, and to put these interests above their own and those of people close to them, such as family members. This is called managing conflicts of interest. Registered charities have to ensure their responsible persons, their board members, are aware of and follow their duty to disclose conflicts. Governance Standard 5, Duty 5, as well as their duty to act honestly and fairly in the best interests of the charity and for its charitable purpose. Governance Standard 5, Duty 2. Lucas will go into this in a bit of detail, as it's a common issue. Lucas, why do you think conflicts of interest can arise for members of charity boards?
Well, board members are often people with numerous family, social and business relationships. These relationships are often of great benefit to the charity itself, and great board members will leverage these relationships to assist the charity to achieve its goals. However, these relationships and the other interests of board members can sometimes conflict with their duty to act in the best interest of the charity. When this happens, a conflict of interest arises. This is a situation in which two competing interests make it difficult or impossible for you to discharge your role as a board member. There are essentially three different types of conflicts of interest. The first are actual conflicts. This is where your interests are actually in conflict with your duties to the charity. For example, if you're on the board of a charity that is considering giving a grant to a kindergarten that your child attends, you will have an actual conflict of interest in that decision. Secondly, we have potential conflicts. This is where you do not currently have a conflict, but there may be a potential for a conflict to arise in the future. For example, if you're on the board of one charity and employed at another in a role where you might at some point apply for a grant from the charity that you are on the board of. This could potentially become a conflict of interest. And finally, there are perceived conflicts. This is where you may not necessarily have a conflict, but an outsider might perceive that you do. Although they may not prevent you from acting impartially, this type of conflict may still damage your organisation's reputation, and it's important that you take them seriously. For example, if you're reviewing quotes for a service and one of the potential providers is the employer of a sibling, while you may believe that you could make an impartial decision that's in the best interests of the charity, an outsider could think that you are making that decision in your own interests or in the interests of someone you know. Let's look at an example. Rajshri is a paediatrician, a children's doctor, and a member of the board of Healthy Hospital. Now, as we've previously discussed, this means that she has duties to Healthy Hospital, which arise from her relationship as a board member. The hospital is considering opening a new children's clinic in a nearby town, serviced by doctors from its own facility. As a children's doctor, Rajshri's private practice is located in this town, and she's concerned that if Healthy Hospital operates a children's clinic nearby, she might lose patients, and thus her business would make less money. Because Rajshri has an interest in the success of her private practice, but also a duty to act in the best interests of the Healthy Hospital, she is experiencing a conflict of interests. In this situation, Rajshri should declare her conflict to the board, and the remaining board members should decide on the appropriate course of action to manage this conflict. In this situation, it's likely that the board would decide that registry should not participate in the discussion or vote in the matter. They may even consider it appropriate to ask her to leave the room for the duration of the discussion. Now, most board members will experience a conflict of interest at some point, and conflicts of interest do not have to represent a problem for your charity if they're managed appropriately. There are some simple steps you can take to respond to these conflicts. These align with the requirements of the governance standards. Firstly, make sure you are aware of any interests that you have that could influence you as a board member. This is largely a reflective exercise, but it's good to consider how you might be conflicted in your duties based on other interests you may have, such as shares in businesses, memberships of organisations, or roles you may have on other boards. If you do have a conflict of interest, either those that relate to a particular decision or any that may be ongoing, make sure that you declare your conflict of interest to your fellow board members as soon as you can. If you're uncertain as to whether or not you have a conflict, make sure you err on the side of caution and raise the issue with your fellow board members so that they can consider and decide on the best course of action together. If your charity doesn't already have one, you should develop a policy on how you identify and manage conflicts of interest. If you do have one, make sure that you know it and that you follow it. Finally, it's a good idea to develop and maintain a register of interests. This is a document where conflicts of interest are recorded so that you can keep track of them, and also record information about any steps you may have taken to address a conflict. Make sure you keep this document up to date and refer to it often. You should ask yourself, as a board member, am I confident that I can declare and manage conflicts of interest as they arise?
Our final point is about the importance of board members understanding their charity's finances and, importantly, how the decisions as a board member impact the charity's financial situation. These particular duties are spelt out in Governance Standard 5, specifically to ensure that the financial affairs of the charity are managed responsibly under Duty 6, and not to allow the charity to operate while it's insolvent under Duty 7. As discussed earlier in the webinar, ensuring that your charity has accesses to the resources it needs to do its work, and that these resources are appropriately managed and protected, is one of the key responsibilities of boards. Lucas will now talk about what's expected of board members in terms of their own understanding of finances.
As a board member, you must have a level of financial literacy that will enable you to make informed decisions about your charity's finances. While many boards appoint treasurers and board members with financial expertise, every board member must be able to read and understand a charity's financial information. You may need to participate in some training to improve your financial literacy as part of your role. As discussed earlier in this presentation, you are required as a board member to be appropriately informed about the matters on which you must make a decision. You cannot make informed decisions about your charity's finances without an understanding of the concepts that relate to them. At the very least, you should be able to determine whether your charity is solvent and what the impact of any decision you make may be on your charity's financial health.
We've had feedback from charities, especially small ones who may only be managing minimal budgets, that understanding reporting requirements can be difficult. How much knowledge does the average board member need?
Financial literacy is an area that many board members do find difficult, but it's an important part of your role. You are not expected to have the same level of expertise as a professional in finance, such as an accountant. However, you must ensure that your financial literacy is sufficient to read and understand your charity's accounts. You cannot rely exclusively on the treasurer or another board member in this regard. Let's have a look at some of the most important financial concepts for board members. Solvency. Being solvent means being able to pay your debts as and when they become due and payable. This means you must have access to the cash or assets that can be converted into cash quickly enough to pay any debts that your charity may have in full and when they are due. If your charity is unable to do this, it is insolvent. One of your duties as a board member is to ensure that your charity does not continue to operate while it is insolvent. Strong financial controls and diligent financial management are the best protections against your charity becoming insolvent. If your assets, the things that you own, do not exceed your liabilities, the things that you owe, or if there is consistently more cash going out of your organisation than coming in, sometimes called negative cash flow, these may be strong warning signs that your charity is heading towards insolvency. Sorry, I should say, it's if your assets are not in excess of your liabilities, that is, you have more liabilities than assets. If you're concerned that your charity is or may become insolvent, you should seek professional advice as soon as possible. So in summary, as a board member, you should make sure that you are closely reviewing your charity's finances. This means reading any financial reports and trying to pick out anything that looks unusual or concerning. It's a good idea to consider verifying some calculations yourself, especially if they are informing assumptions about your charity's financial health. If there are things about your charity's finances that you don't understand, you should feel confident to ask questions or to ask for more information. If you're making a decision that could have an impact on your charity's financial health, consider what this impact may be and whether it's appropriate to your charity. And finally, monitor your charity's solvency and make sure that you are confident your charity is not or is not heading towards becoming insolvent. You should ask yourself, do I understand my charity's financial position and how my decision may affect it?
Thanks, Lucas. Well, I think that's quite a bit to take in, don't you? Now, a bit of a wrap-up of what we've covered today. Obviously, each one of these topics could be covered in detail in their own webinar topic, but hopefully you've gained an understanding of some of the key obligations of charities and board members, as well as some of the key areas we see as issues for board members and charities generally. We gave you an overview of what the ACNC does and how it relates to your charity, and then outlined the responsibilities you have to your charity as a board member. We also looked at some of the most significant issues relevant to the work of charity board members. These were knowing your charity's purpose, where to find it, and to always consider whether your actions as a board member align with it, ensuring that your charity remains a not-for-profit and that there are processes in place that support this, being accountable to your charity's members, acting with care and diligence in your role as a board member, properly responding to actual, potential and perceived conflicts of interest, and managing your charity's finances responsibly. Now we'll have a look at other sources of information for you in exercising your role as a charity board member. While we go through other sources of information on this webinar's topic, feel free to ask any questions via the question box on your dashboard, and we will allow time for answering them at the end of our presentation. Thanks, Lucas.
Our website has plenty of additional information that will provide more detail on some of the topics that we've covered in today's webinar. On this slide, we've included the links to several pages that are relevant to today's webinar. You can access each of them by going to acnc.gov.au/ and then including the words listed on the slide. For example, acnc.gov.au/ongoing obligations. We have a range of resources that aim to support charities and board members in their roles. For example, our guide Governance for Good, which explains the role of board members and of governance in charities, and our guide Protect My Charity from Harm, from fraud, which provides support for charities to create financial controls to protect their resources and assets from being abused. In the footer of our website, you'll also find a page with useful links to other sources of information.
You can stay in touch with the ACNC in a number of ways, particularly by subscribing to our updates via the homepage. Find out more information about the ACNC's program of webinars at acnc.gov.au/webinars and visit our multimedia page under Publications, Media Centre for educational videos. You can call us on 13ACNC, which is 132262. Our phone lines are open between 9 AM and 6 PM Monday to Friday, Australian Eastern Summertime, and they are staffed by helpful people like April who understand the charity sector and can provide advice on how charities can meet their obligations to the ACNC. Our staff are trained to give general advice on a range of topics related to the regulation of charity. You can also email them at advice@acnc.gov.au. This is a particularly good idea if your issue is complex or if you think it will need detailed consideration. And of course, we're active on social media, so you can find us on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube. And that brings us to the formal part at the end of our webinar. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day to join us, and thank you for your questions. We hope this has been useful to you and helped you to further your understanding of the responsibilities and opportunities that come with being a board member. These webinars run at least monthly and cover a range of topics. The next in this series will be held on the Tuesday 24th of November and will focus on managing conflicts of interest. You can sign up to attend this webinar and any others at acnc.gov.au/webinar. A recording and transcript of this webinar and any other webinars will be available on this page as well. We are always looking for ways to improve our education products, and so we would appreciate it if you took the time to fill out the evaluation for this webinar, which will be available when this webinar closes. If you have any additional comments or questions, you can get in touch with the ACNC education team directly at education@acnc.gov.au. I'm just wondering whether there are any questions that have come through, April, other than those you've answered directly.
Where can I go to increase my financial literacy in reading the summary statements I see as a board member? Any suggestions there?
Financial literacy, we know that there are a range of providers of education on financial literacy. What I'd recommend is having a look at our reporting pages, which is acnc.gov.au/reporting, and we have links to lots of resources and other places on those pages.
In particular, if I can chime in, the CPA, the Certified Public Accountants, and the Chartered Accountants of Australia and New Zealand both have excellent guidance that's freely available on their website on financial reporting, which is tailored to not-for-profit audiences, but also additional generalist information about that topic. There is training that is available for not-for-profits that is tailored specifically to that audience, and that can be very useful for first-time directors.
Thanks, Lucas. Well, that's it from me and the formal presentation. We'll stay online for a while, probably until 1 p.m. our time, in case you have any last-minute questions. Thank you to Lucas for joining me and to Lee and April for answering questions. Thanks also to everyone who participated, and we'll see you next time.